What if, for just a fleeting moment, America's most visible black millionaires looked poised to risk it all, not just for social media applause, but for justice, for solidarity, for real systemic change, and then they blinked? That's what happened in the NBA bubble. For 18 hours, it felt like the whole game had changed. The Milwaukee Bucks refused to take the court, protesting the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. In an instant, the ripple effect began. Other teams followed, Houston and OKC, then the Lakers and Blazers. Even beyond basketball, players in the WNBA, Major League Baseball, and MLS walked off. It felt like the birth of something truly disruptive, something historic. But just as quickly as it started, it ended. The NBA playoffs resumed within days. The revolutionary flame, so recently sparked, was doused not by outside pressure, but by an internal contradiction: wealth. Here's where it all unraveled. Multiple headlines painted this walkout as a boycott, but that term is misleading. A boycott is typically consumer-driven. This wasn't that. This was a labor stoppage, a strike. Yet few dared to call it that. Not the NBA, not the players, and not the media. Why? Because striking has legal and financial implications. It risks voiding contracts. It threatens the league's collective bargaining agreement. It invites retaliation. So the messaging was carefully curated. The NBA postponed games. Players expressed concerns. No one officially said, "We are refusing to work." The revolution that almost was never allowed to be named. That, right there, is the crux of the issue. Beneath the jerseys, the sneakers, the hashtags, NBA players are more than just athletes. They are among the wealthiest black men in America. And wealth doesn't just buy luxury. It buys caution. It breeds self-preservation. Because being revolutionary means sacrifice. And most millionaires don't do sacrifice. Another hook came in the form of promises. Once the walkouts gained attention, the NBA scrambled. They promised change, 10-year community investment plans, Black Lives Matter decals painted on courts, jersey slogans like equality and say their names. It was symbolism repackaged as substance, flash without fire. Meanwhile, the structural forces that allow police violence, mass incarceration, and economic inequality to persist remained untouched. There were no binding commitments, no systemic demands, no radical actions, just feel-good optics. The truth is, these gestures were a balm for fans and management alike. They made it easier to return to business as usual. And business did resume, quickly. That's the game behind the game. Appease the audience. Avoid the disruption. But what happened to the spirit of radicalism? In the heat of the moment, it looked like players might finally seize their labor power. After all, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Without players, there are no games, no advertisers, no TV deals, no product. For a moment, it felt like they realized that power. But just as fast, it slipped away. Why? Because labor power requires unity. It demands that the workers see themselves as workers first, not as brands, not as entrepreneurs, not as celebrities. And the NBA, more than any other sports league, is built on personal branding. Players are not just employees, they're individual corporations. That's a hard contradiction to resolve. You can't serve two masters. You can't be a revolutionary and a brand ambassador at the same time. Here's another moment to hold on to: the emotional weight of the decision. Many players genuinely struggled with whether to return. Some cried, some were angry, some spoke from the heart about wanting to make a real difference. But emotional sincerity does not equal political clarity. Being well-intentioned doesn't always lead to transformation. It's easy to confuse feeling strongly about injustice with taking action to dismantle it. That's why the question isn't whether these players care, it's whether their position in the economic hierarchy allows them to act. And more often than not, it doesn't. Let's zoom out. This is not just a sports story. This is a story about liberalism dressed as revolution, a moment that exposed the limits of what celebrity activism can truly accomplish. Because revolutionary movements don't begin in arenas. They begin in streets, in neighborhoods, in grassroots spaces far removed from corporate sponsorships and camera crews. NBA players, no matter how sympathetic or impassioned, exist within a structure that is fundamentally opposed to radical change. The league itself is owned and operated by billionaires. Many of them have ties to law enforcement, private prisons, and political power structures. Any threat to the League's operation is a threat to that wealth. And so, even player-led protests must eventually bend to the pressure of capital. Frantz Fanon, the great anti-colonial thinker, once said that liberals are as much the enemy of the oppressed as overt racists. Why? Because they offer soothing words in place of action. They delay justice under the banner of compromise. This is the role that the NBA, and by extension its players, risk playing. By settling for slogans, for watered-down reforms, for media campaigns, they become part of the machine they once tried to disrupt. They trade radical potential for social approval. They become the middlemen of black struggle, performing solidarity while avoiding its consequences. So where does that leave the fans? What's the responsibility of those watching from the sidelines? It starts by breaking the illusion, by recognizing that real change doesn't trickle down from the top. It rises from the bottom. The people on the ground, the activists, the organizers, the community leaders are the engine of transformation, not the celebrities, not the spokespeople, not the brands. Even the best-intentioned public figures are limited by the systems they serve. And in the NBA, that system is not designed for liberation. It's designed for profit. To be clear, this isn't about condemning the players. It's about being honest about the contradictions. It's about understanding that black liberation cannot be brokered through corporate-approved activism. That wearing a slogan is not the same as risking something. That wealth distances people from the material realities of the oppressed. When players returned to the court, the league applauded their bravery. But true bravery might have meant walking away entirely, risking contracts, sacrificing status, disrupting the machine rather than polishing it. That kind of action is rare, and for the wealthy, it's almost impossible. And so, the revolution wasn't televised. Not really. It flickered briefly in a Florida gym. It showed what could have been. Then it was absorbed, co-opted, and sold back as inspiration. But here's the final truth. Revolutions don't need permission. They don't wait for approval from networks or sponsors. They happen when ordinary people decide enough is enough. They happen when the exploited stop performing and start demanding. They happen not in the arenas of the elite, but in the hearts of the many. Because in the end, the revolution was never going to come from the rich. It will always belong to the people.